Khari, how are you, sir?
I'm good, sir. Thank you for having me.
Always, man, always. You're running for Brooklyn Borough President.
Yes, second time around.
Yeah, man. Second time, man. Let's see how it works out, man. But my question to you, Khari, is why?
Whew, why? So that's the question I've been getting a lot of from folks. Look, I have been in the business of people and community for a long time. My political and community life predates many even elected officials now who are sitting in office. But Roberto, I hate to see people suffering, right? And, the current administration has not done what I think a borough president's office should do. Even though you may have been elected by a certain group of people, you represent 2.8 million people. And North Brooklyn should be no different than South Brooklyn. Schools and communities shouldn't be any different. Healthcare shouldn't be different. And so when you just kind of look at the overall responsibility, I would say, as a Brooklyn Borough President, Marty's a hard person to keep up to, right? Eric did a good job. I go all the way back to Howard Golden because I'm just that old. I think that when you have to be a bridge to City Hall, when you have to be an advocate for communities, when you have to have relationships with elected officials, no matter what part of the borough they are, what their affiliation is, it's really about serving people. And so, I see a need. And trust and believe, I don't want to be a mayor, I don't want to be a controller, I don't want to be anything after this job, but I want to do this job and really be good at this job and be dedicated to the job.
All right, so what you would say is, again, and based on what you're saying, is that current borough president Reynoso is parochial. Would you say he caters only to North Brooklyn? So here's how I would frame it, right? Based on, and again, to date myself, I've seen different iterations of New York City, as you can tell by the gray in my beard. But I would you frame this, and this is how people are gonna frame it: old meets new. No. Old Brooklyn versus New Brooklyn. Right? Old school Central Brooklyn or other parts of Brooklyn, the traditional Brooklynites, born and bred, and the new arrivals and the gentrifiers and the bike lane loving people. That's
it's
but correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I think that's the way the narrative is going. But that's a narrative I want to dispel.
Okay.
Because there's a place for bike lanes, but there's also a place for parking spots, right? There's a place for renters and a place for homeowners. But, when you look at the borough in its entirety, I hate to quote, your former boss, Bill de Blasio, but it is a tale of two cities when it comes down to it. It's a tale of two boroughs. And so I think that there needs to be a connection to both sides. I think communication is key in any relationship, and I want to hear from the bike lanes. I want to hear from the quote unquote gentrifiers, but I also want to hear from the indigenous community who's been here, who've helped build Brooklyn. And I think that you can't
real or no, not imagine real or being priced out.
Right. Yeah.
The city's bleeding blue collar people by the minute. I was just talking to someone yesterday talking about how the Democratic voters are getting wealthier.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. And then, I ride for union, right? When I was at Brookdale Hospital, 1199, CIR is our union. DC 37 is our union. They're not making enough to stay in Brooklyn. They're not making enough to stay in the city. And so how do you, as a borough president that, runs community boards, has hand in land use, have hand in education, not visit enough schools, right? Or not work in a way where even if it's at will development, really talk to these folks and say, hey, look, I need 40% AMI. I need 60% AMI because this is what the middle class and the moderate class are dealing with. And so I don't want to separate the two communities, right? Because I think to be a borough president, you got to connect all communities. But there's a real distinct difference that if you don't show up in the South, in the East, it's a little different.
Khari, what do you make of City of Yes? That's a transformative policy proposal that is meaningful to a place like Brooklyn when you talk about the lack of affordability?
Yeah, so initially I wasn't a fan of it, right? Because I think that when you really look at what affordability, 60 to 120% AMI is not affordability. Again, for the union workers, for the CUNY workers, for the parks workers. I love what the city council did in terms of changing the AMI, changing the availability. But it's not like if you go through Brooklyn, you don't see stuff being built every day. It's who could live in there, right? And so even though we're adding more homes and ability for people to live, if we don't set the bar enough that it's true affordable, then it's a problem, And then, I also want to talk about the homeowners. Like, my mom owned a home in East Flatbush. I own a home in Crown Heights. My property taxes are going through the roof. So what happens when I retire? My mom passed, but what happened when she was retiring? She barely could keep her property tax going. So then you're also talking about moving folks out in that spot. And another big thing I want to talk about is the healthcare, man. The the current borough president talked about maternal health outcomes, but what happens to our seniors? What happens to our children? So I want to invest in our safety net hospitals, those 10 safety net hospitals from downstate to Kings County, all the way across to the north side, right? And I think that we have to really look at, the role of being a borough president is being executive. It's not necessarily policy. And I don't think people realize that. I think Marty showed that you go out there, you engage in community, you understand what they are, you support them in that way, but it's all communities. Marty had no problem being in Coney Island, in Bed-Stuy, in Williamsburg. There's a difference.
Have you had this conversation with the borough president? You've been around Brooklyn. You're a native Brooklynite. So is he.
Yeah.
He was born on the south side of Williamsburg. He's a kid from Brooklyn, right? Based on we need to be empowering all communities and people native, have you had a conversation with him and say, look, prior to you running, right? You ran the last time and say, hey, a lot happens in politics, right?
Yeah.
It's to some extent, it's still in some places with some people a gentleman's game, or gentlewoman,
And I want him to
have you sat down with him and say, hey, I disagree with you on these items. My suggestion is, hey,
right.
What about us? What about this community? What about this pocket of Brooklyn? Have you had this dialogue with the borough president? In the
early parts of it, I tried to. When he first, we were actually at a 500-men event, and he's telling me about, them trying to figure out how to move county. I'm like, you're borough president. Don't worry about county. When he started to do the maternal health stuff, he reached out to me to connect to Brookdale. And I was like, hey, dude, don't put all your money in just hospitals, because hospitals are the place they go to have the kids. Prenatal care and stuff, and then we haven't spoke to them. And then what happened with, former Deputy Borough President Richardson, I reached out and I was like, we don't do black women like that, right? Like whatever's going on in your house, keep it in your house. You have your communications director putting stuff in the paper. And I felt that was a very disrespectful place, regardless of whatever the situation was. And after that, I've just seen him at, barely places. Now that I'm running, I see him at a lot of events, no shade, but I'm going to keep it 100. I'm seeing you at school meetings now. I'm seeing you at certain places that no one's seen you for 3 years. So at the least of it, Roberto, I'm saying, look, if this isn't for me and I don't win, I think that the thing that I'll get out of it most is making him work a little harder and seeing other communities.
Got it. Khari, what the stories in the papers written about a political action fund tied to Reverend Cockfield and you, would you say that could be misconstrued as you are a Mayor Adams candidate?
Yeah, that's definitely.
I want you to clear the record, right? Because it's in the papers, right?
Look, so
it's sort of that you're tied to that, or you're tied to the mayor.
I am tied to the God Squad, right? I am a advisory board member on the God Squad. I've been tied to Brookdale Hospital. I spent 8 years of my career there. I've been tied to clergy, right? Reverend Cockfield is Reverend Cockfield at God's Battalion Church.
Got it.
And he's been a friend for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that pact is tied to Eric, does that screw me up a bit? I'm sure it does, right? Yeah, the world looks at it like, you're an Eric guy. Look, I worked at the Senate under Eric Adams, right? I know Eric.
Yeah, and I'm friends with Pastor Monrose, and I know their work, no violence and stuff.
So I think part of it too is that we gotta get away from these crazy narratives, right? It's the same thing about North versus South. I think the reality of it is it's disappointing when people say, okay, well, he got this check from this person. I also got a check from a whole bunch of old ladies, right? And then I don't know what they've done in their life, and the check just is the reality of saying that someone believes enough in what I'm saying. And Reverend Cockfield's church is in East Flatbush, around the corner from where my mom used to live. That's the area I grew up in. That's the area I've been serving. South Brooklyn, Central Brooklyn, East Brooklyn, parts of North Brooklyn. So I get tired of hearing stuff like that, and I feel bad, you know what I mean? Because I'm not looking at where he got his money from. I think that's the wrong part of it. But the reality of it is Al Cockfield has been a personal friend.
Yeah.
You know, when we had a memorial for my mom, I used their church. I've spoken at his church. We've done health stuff with Brookdale at his church. And so, you know, he should have given me a check, right? You know what I mean? And so I don't look at who your friends are. I look at how they've treated me. Yeah.
And I'm not knocking them in any way. I'm just saying, right? It was a
but I appreciate
written,
that.
right? And you have I'm affording you the opportunity to correct the record.
Yeah. I appreciate
Khari,
that.
quick question in terms of that. There's also been a sort of what we would say cross endorsement with Borough President Reynoso, and now citywide controller Mark Levine.
Right.
What's your angle, right? Are you? There's Council Member Brannon. There's Assembly Member Raj Kumar.
Yeah.
Or something like that in the cards for you? Or are you having those conversations? Talk about who your supporters are.
I'm right now. It's me, my family. Right, we're in the early stages of it. I respect Mark Levine. I love Mark Levine. He's, I would say even he's a family friend. Did it hurt to see that? Yeah, it did definitely hurt. But I realized that what I didn't do the last time was run to win. And so I could only respect Mark and figure out, like, if he feels that Reynoso's going to help him get to that point all day long, right? The reality for me is I need to win this seat. I need to serve Borough.
Talk about the last time you ran and now, right? What would you say, look, if I had a crystal ball, I would have done more of this, right? And I think I should have done more, woulda, coulda, shoulda. What would you say are the things you think, again, in hindsight is 2020, but what are you doing more of now that you feel you should have,
A lot of hand-to-hand combat, right? A lot of getting folks to see and talk to me personally, getting a chance to talk about what I've been doing for a long time. Like whether it's come from COVID, whether it's Brookdale Hospital, whether it's social justice work, I didn't get to tell my story. And that showed what happened, right? Reynoso, Joanne Simon, Rob Cornegie, and Matthew Eugene were the top four, all elected officials, all with a base. And so I'm learning what that means. I'm learning that politics is really about informing people of the work you've done. And my record, I can put my record up to any elected official walking out here. I've done more community work or just as much community work as some folks who are sitting in higher places. And I think this time around, it's about being very concise with my messaging, and not being coy about it, right? So me even being on your show, I ain't being coy about it. I'm the better candidate. I have the better relationships. I'm not afraid to be in any room or with anybody. And I think it's time for a change for Brooklyn.
Khari, remember the old, ain't nothing going on but the rent?
Yeah.
Relationships, all that doesn't pay the bills. How much money do you have in the kitty, and how's that going? Because you need money.
Yeah. So
these things are expensive, campaign consultants and
it's
mail
real.
And digi, and it's expensive endeavor.
My last filing, I was at 105,000. Some was a little rough. A lot of the political conversations were a little rough. I mean, I'm proud to say that I've outraised them in those two periods. Oh, yeah. I raised them in the July filing.
An incumbent?
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. And I mean, I think part of it is the messaging, right? I think part of it is the reality that people want to change. People want to feel that they know their borough president. So I expect to get my matching funds in February. I'm sure most other candidates will as well, but fundraising has been good.
Interesting.
Could it be better? It could always be better,
yeah.
But the way the system is, it's the hard time in the holiday season. If I ask you for a check, you'd be like, look, I got Christmas gifts to get, And so that's been the phone calls that we've been getting. But I think that for me, I could say 46% of my current donors are new donors.
Yeah.
So that means I have 46% of folks that never even thought about me 3 years ago who are supporting me now.
Khari, name 3 things he's done right. I don't believe that, I don't believe everybody or every human. There's got to be 3. What do you think 3 things that Borough President Reynoso has done right?
So he's
you say, look, I got to give him his props. I got to give him, he's done these things right.
So his maternal health, I think, is not only something citywide, but it's nationwide.
Okay.
I think his desire to support, especially women of color who are ignored in that place, is exceptional, right? And I wish he would have done more with it, because I think it's something that if, as we look at where the money really came into, it hasn't rolled into the places that it should have rolled into. Part of it too, I think, I'm a environmental dude, right? And one of the things that he promoted was like the green trash trucks, right? Garbage trucks. I thought that was really dope.
Okay.
I think that was a really good thing. I may stop at 2, my brother, because I think that part of that reality is that, I'll back up. So I think that the report that he did on Brooklyn was needed. I think it was a needed report to talk about the heat maps and the areas of it. But again, it's not about presenting that, it's about doing something to it. But, on a personal, I'm a Brooklynites, I'm a constituent, I'll probably stop at those 2.
Yeah. Any forums so far?
I did that forum. I felt really good about that.
Was he there, the borough president?
He wasn't there, but I don't know if he came after I was.
Borough-wide, where you guys are in the dance against seats?
No. This was just a political club doing an interview.
Cool.
I guess in January it's gonna go ham, right? I think in January we all gonna get phone calls and been putting out questionnaires and filling out questionnaires. And like I said, I think my community record stands against anybody in this.
Got it. Khari, let's wrap this up. Anything I forgot to ask you? Anything you want to add to the conversation and or mention?
I mean, nothing other than just like I'm a community guy, man. And I think when people elect me, they're going to get a borough president who's going to be in every community board. I already got a plan for being a community board, 3 community boards a month. Something that this predecessor's not done. I'm going to visit every school in Brooklyn to see what their capital needs are, so that we can really, create an equitable educational community. I'm going to get in on the arts, man. I'm going to bring back Wingate. I'm going to bring back Coney Island, McCarran Park. Like, I got a plan of doing, community block parties so that the communities have something to smile about. These are the things that the borough president needs to do. And look, Brooklyn tourism, that's going to be my number 1 thing. This is going to be a destination place again, and when I do the concerts, they're going to be the Marty Markowitz concert series.
Khari, thank you so much for taking the time and coming here, man, and talk about your platform. Hopefully this won't be the last time, man. Continued success and best of luck to you, man.
Appreciate you, brother.